Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and a few days ago I made a video about rifles versus shotgun for home defense, and a lot of questions came out of that. Some opinions were dropped in, and some people actually commented there and on my Facebook page that they felt like a shotgun does more damage than a rifle, and so shot per shot, the shotgun, even though you have a lower rate of fire, lower capacity, uh, a little more unwieldy in close quarters than, say, a rifle designed for that, that they felt that it had superior wound trauma and was a better weapon and maybe even had less over penetration concerns. And so let's go ahead and look at some of the ballistics data when you select appropriate ammo. And I think people are going to be a little surprised when they look at this, because the thing you need to realize is that if you're shooting a bunch of buckshot, you're basically shooting a bunch of like 27 or 30 caliber lead balls that don't expand. So they're moving at sometimes, 1,100, 1,200 feet per second from the shotgun barrel. They're just like a solid little slugs from small caliber pistols. They tend to just over penetrate. They don't expand. They do not have hydrostatic shock. If you go back to all my FBI video that I did, it breaks all of that down. Bullets moving at that sort of speed do not have hydrostatic shock. They wound purely through their mechanical cutting or piercing damage. And so when you look at various ballistics gels, I've taken, this first slide is going to be a law enforcement approved double aught buckshot, shot from a 12 gauge at the top. So it's got 9 pellets in there. And as you can see, these pellets are moving, I think, about 1,100 feet per second coming out of the shotgun barrel. It does a lot of damage. It does a tremendous amount of damage because you have 9 little small bullets penetrating through. But here's one of the first problems you notice. Yes, it does a lot of damage with the shot, because if you notice, the spread is very small. Notice this isn't quite point blank range. They go through and start with a small little spread, and they spread as they go through, but you still have to aim. It's not really any more accurate in close than a rifle is, but they spread through, they do their damage, and they over penetrate. You've got to remember, for the FBI's rules for handguns, they recommend 12 to 18 inches of penetration, and anything at the 18 inch and beyond that does that in ballistics gel, which again, the human body isn't that deep, but you've got other things, you've got bones and things that'll most likely slow things down. But if you go through purely soft tissue, most people aren't more than about a foot thick unless they're fat. So here's your problem. You're at risk for an average size individual unless you hit bone with some of those of over penetration and flying right out of the back, because those pellets are hitting the 18 inch or further mark. And you'll notice all of them that don't blow out of the top of the block surpass the FBI's recommendations for handguns. So you're at a great risk of over penetration. Here's your other issue. You've got 9 of them in there, and they're spreading out as they leave. So you've got the potential for far more of them missing a bone and just going through soft tissue and flying out of someone's back and hitting someone downrange. So you've got over-penetration concerns immediately as soon as you hit someone. Now, if you look down at better ammo for hitting people out of, say, a 5.56, which is what most of your little AR-15 carbines are going to shoot, you're going to notice the first one there is a 69 grain Sierra Match King. That is not even considered a hunting round. That's a target round, but they tend to disintegrate when they hit anything because they have really thin jackets, because that makes them more accurate for match shooting. And you'll notice that it produces some pretty interesting trauma there. It stops. Most of it is stopped at the 9 inch mark. You'll see that's where most of the damage is, and it has a tremendous wound starting from about 2 to 3 inches in. That opens up to about 5 to 6 inches in diameter for several inches. That is due to the bullet moving so fast, because that's a little 22 caliber bullet, and it's leaving little chunks. If you look at those specks in there, that is actually pieces of bullet fragment. So it's blowing a hole that is 5 to 6 inches in diameter once it gets several inches inside. And then at about 8 to 9 inches, most of that stops. You'll see a bullet fragment, then you'll see the last little core of the bullet as it's slowing down, traveling up to about 13 inches. This is massively superior to any handgun round on the market by a massive margin, even by the FBI's tests. You have this enormous gaping wound going up to about 7 to 8 inches inside. It's going to bleed out faster. There's all that hydrostatic shock causing that. The very thing that handguns don't cause. This is what you see with a rifle bullet coming out of an AR-15 from a little 22 caliber bullet. Then the bullet itself penetrates up to about 13 and it stops. You go down to a more frangible varminting type round, a 55 grain Nosler ballistic tip. That's a polymer tipped round. You'll see the same sort of characteristic, this enormous wound channel starting at about 2 inches in. You've got to remember that hole is big enough that it's blowing through the meat for you to put your hand inside of. You could put your hand through that opening and probably open your hand up inside that hole. That's how big of a cavity it's causing in tissue. That continues for about 7 inches. You see chunks of bullet everywhere, then the bullet stopping, the main last big core stopping at about 12 inches inside. So you look there, the wound is early on vastly superior to the shotgun's hole because the shotgun's doing purely mechanical damage. You see the shotgun creating a larger wound channel deeper inside as all those pellets start to spread out. Your spread actually really starts. But the wound from the shotgun, if you think about the average depth of a human body, and even someone who's really fat, all that secondary stuff behind it is going to be on their adipose tissue kind of on the way out. You're going to more likely to get organ damage, which is really what's going to slow people down with this rifle. Now, we could argue there's a technically more potential tissue trauma from the shotgun, but a lot of it's over penetrating. But at the very least, they're in a comparable range of each other in terms of tissue trauma. As far as overall tissue trauma you're going to see, they're pretty close to each other. So this idea that a shotgun is going to do a lot more damage is people failing to factor in the massive hydrostatic shock that you get from a rifle round. It absolutely damages tissue several inches away from the bullet path itself in any direction as it's going through, just because of that sonic movement it's making, because these bullets are moving in excess of twice of the speed of sound. Now, if you really want to take it a next step up, let's say you no longer want to use an intermediate round. Let's say that you want to go to a 308, and I didn't even do any sort of frangible round here. I purely look at the Match King because, again, these bullets work very, very well on people. These are tried and true bullets out in the field for sniping. But again, you can put this in a carbine style rifle with a short barrel on it, a 16-inch barrel, and use it in close quarters with, again, a 20 or 25 round magazine easily. And something like an AR-10, a SCAR-17, this is even a vastly superior weapon for home defense. And from a penetration perspective, look at that penetration. It is actually less penetration than the shotgun. The last little chunk of core of the bullet, because you can see more of the bullet further back, that last core of the bullet, which is maybe a third to a half of the bullet's total weight, if that, is stopping at about 15.5 inches inside. We're still within the FBI's recommendations for penetration for self-defense and for police work. But look at the absolutely enormous wound cavity. That, when you look at the amount of it that would actually be inside the human tissue, not over penetrated, the wound cavity on that is possibly larger than the 12 gauge shotgun buckshot did with all the pellets hitting the person. So when we're talking about rifle wound ballistics versus the shotgun, the rifle can absolutely hold its own, with the advantage of being far less recoil, easier to wield, easier to handle, so they kick less, higher rates of fire, higher capacity in the majority of models that are out there. So I think this kind of shows that when you look at it from a ballistics perspective and you factor everything in, the rifle is in many ways vastly superior to the shotgun, because even the wound characteristics are closer to what you want to see while trying to avoid over penetration. So there you have it, guys. There's just some photos of that using law enforcement approved or law enforcement type ammo that would be used in 12 gauge, 5.56, or even 308 out of rifles, and gives you an idea of why I recommend the rifle for close quarters. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.